Hey, what's going on everybody, George here, and today I'll be having a little graphics comparison, a quote-unquote comparison of the remasters between the definitive edition of Mafia 2 and the Mafia 2 old-time reality mode running on the classic 2010 version of the game. I've made videos showcasing the old-time reality mode before, and I gotta say that it looked really well, made some decent changes towards improving the original game, and for some time it was the closest thing that we had to a Mafia 2 remaster until the definitive edition came out. This video will be split in a few segments, starting with main characteristics, then textures, lighting and weathers, shadows and reflections, and finally some miscellaneous stuff. This first part is more of a heads up really, so you know what are the main differences between the two, and what are the main things that they are changing, so there's no confusion about that later. The definitive edition of Mafia 2 is more consistent in its approach by pretty much touching on every aspect of the game and improving it in one way or another. Old-time reality on the other hand mainly focuses on lighting and weather. It does also change a lot of textures in the outside world, but leaves out of the picture things like cutscene elements or character models, clothes and other stuff. Finally, before we get into the texture comparison, it's important to mention the color grading. It is very different in both, and in certain situations, both can go to some extremes by oversaturating certain colors. Here in the beginning of chapter 3, you can see that the definitive edition prefers red color in the highlights and blue in the shadows, while old-time reality goes for an overall green color grade and lots of bloom. In another example, it's the definitive edition that goes to an extreme, but this time with a blue color. So, to be fair to both, and since I couldn't find anything neutral for both of them, I just chose the least extreme conditions to compare the textures in, but I'd still say to ignore the colors because they can easily throw you off in your judgment in the next part. The texture changes in both are very different. Each of them has their own approach, style and look that they're going for. As to which one is better, it's hard to say, and it's also a very subjective thing, so I think I'll leave this one for you to decide. And yeah, these are just a few examples of the texture changes that they both make. Other things like fire, smoke, explosions and such don't seem to have been changed, so that's why I'm not paying too much attention to them. Alright, so even though Mafia 2 doesn't have a dynamic time or weather system, its lighting and weather are constantly changing at almost every checkpoint. So for this part, we're going to be comparing them directly, checkpoint for checkpoint, so it's fair. Starting with Home Sweet Home and the winter season, we can see that old-time reality has a diminished brightness and more neutral colors compared to its rival. The definitive edition also seems to be crisper and more blue saturated. During the daytime, apart from the colors, there aren't any major differences between the two. A very big change though can be seen in chapter 2, for example, where the light snow in the definitive edition has turned into a snowstorm in old-time reality. It's a weather that I particularly really liked with its low viewing distance and claustrophobic feel. Also, it fits really well the narrative that this is the coldest winter on record, as mentioned by Joe in the beginning of the game. Normal light snow still exists in the game, just in different missions. During the night, regardless of the weather, snowy or not, the colors and the look between the two differs very much. For example, in Enemy of the State, both have very bright street and car lights, with old-time reality boosting the bloom effect a bit too much. On the other hand though, it's very bright and colorful compared to the definitive edition's monotone brownish color grade. Murphy's Law is pretty much the same story, but this time instead of brown it uses blue color. Moving to spring season and chapter 7, unsurprisingly, Old Time Reality goes for a more dreamy and softer look with large amounts of bloom and warm colors. The Definitive Edition on the other hand goes in the opposite direction with a very crisp, clean and contrasty look and kind of surprisingly cooler tones. Although this may sound a little bit backwards for when you're trying to present a sunny scenario, the overall look and colors in both are great. Next to each other they are very different, but when you're just playing one of them, I think you'll be satisfied with both approaches. During sunset in the Wild Ones, both are using the same method, but this time both are going for warm colors, one with orange and the other one with yellow. Light Rain in A Friend of Ours is something that I don't think looks very good in either of them. It looks kind of blunt and flat, if I can put it that way. Heavy Rain after that though is much better in the Definitive Edition, with Old Time Reality lowering the overall brightness once again, just like in Home Sweet Home. This trend continues for the rest of the mission, and you can really see it when Vito's house gets burned down, where the fire doesn't look as bright. From here on, the rain in the Definitive Edition stops and the ground is left wet with these great looking puddles that reflect light, but in Old Time Reality it keeps raining for the rest of the mission with this weird low brightness look that just doesn't look right. Moving on with interior lighting, the story here is pretty much the same, with the Definitive Edition continuing with a more contrasty look and a predominant color, while Old Time Reality stays more neutral. Even though Old Time Reality doesn't really make any changes to either of them, I still wanted to show you just how big the difference is here, especially when it comes to shadows. Sadly though, the Definitive Edition lacks the specular map on the ground that was giving off these reflections that you can see here. They looked pretty well, so it's a bit of a mystery as to why they removed them. Finally, a few miscellaneous changes from both of them. First are the main menus that have each seen a makeover, and they all look great. Also, in Old Time Reality, the map is changed with a more interactive one that has more blips, street names and even some facts. It's an overall great addition into the game, and it also changes the way the radar works while playing, by constantly zooming in and out depending on whether you're in a car or walking. Also in Old Time Reality, although not very miscellaneous, in a lot of missions the weathers have been completely changed, like in the beginning of the Wild Ones, where it's raining, which is not the case otherwise, or in the final chapter of the game where it's nighttime. And yeah, that's pretty much it for this comparison and some of the main changes that these two make. Comment down below which one do you like more, and while you're at it, you can also give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to my channel for more. Thank you all so much for watching this video, and I'll see you next time.